let's move on to our panel sessions. So the first one is a general panel about creating safer spaces at work. I'd like you to whoop whoop as we introduce our panelists to the stage. First of all, Dana James Edward. Dana, hello, Dana. Next up, who's next up? Shakil Butt.
Hiya.
That's why we have to do this now, because it takes so long to get everyone on the stage. Next we have Debbie Watt.
Hey.
Yeah, look, tech's working. And last but not least, Kirsty Mac. Hi, everybody. Welcome, panel. Fantastic. Now, as I said to people before the session, I'm going to attempt to be Fiona Bruce, which might be a big leap of imagination for you, but bear with me. I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves, and just while they're doing that, to say or to tell us what they think is the main thing that they're going to take away from today, and then we'll move into Q&A. And what I'd ask people to do is use the chat function, and there's a Q&A line in there. So if you put your questions in there, I will try and answer them as we go and put them to the panel, rather. Okay, so who wants to go first? Dana, you're first in my screen. Over to you.
Sure, no problem. Hi, everyone. I'm an equity, diversity and inclusion specialist. Diversity and inclusion is a very emotive topic, and safe spaces are really important for learning, but also just for moving forward, right? People have to feel safe enough to be able to share their lived experiences and their pain and insight, and they have to be secure in the knowledge that they will be believed and there won't be gaslighting when they do decide to share. But also just in general, inclusion is a journey, and people who are on that journey need to feel safe to be able to ask questions and get answers, knowing that we're not giving out any awards for wokeness and they're not going to be ridiculed or shamed or made to feel stupid, no matter what they ask. For inclusion perspectives, we need space where there's grace and people don't have to be afraid that if they don't use the most right words, they're going to be attacked or censured, and so they have to sit in silence. And part of my job as a specialist is to create those spaces, and that's why I'm here today.
Thank you very much, Dana. And I apologize, I didn't give you a debrief for the previous sessions because I know you weren't able to come until now. So you don't need to share with us what
Well, I managed to make it from rugby. So I was here from the rugby section. So I think my biggest takeaway so far from what I've heard is that we all have a responsibility to make things safe for others. And that safety can come in the very small things that we do. I think we all think we have to be some kind of superheroes, but actually the very small things we do can make a difference.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So, Debbie, welcome.
Hello. Okay, is my sound okay? Can everyone hear me okay? Excellent. Well, I'm a coaching and organisational psychologist, and I'm the managing director at Bridgeborn Psychology. And much of the work we do, I would describe as picking up the pieces after the aftermath of things going wrong in the workplace. And you know, I really love my work, and I love that journey of supporting people after these difficult things have happened. And so much about what we've talked about today, particularly Lethan and Jonathan, so many of the clients I've worked with have experienced similar things. And so, you know, there's many reasons why people might have gone off onto sickness absence. Life happens, we have sort of health things, finance things, personal things, but work is such a big part of our lives. It really, it's who we are. So much of our identity comes from work. And so when work becomes a non-safe place, it's a really difficult time. And so the sort of work that we do is supporting people to develop skills and coping strategies to become more resilient. And resilience gets bandied around too much. It's almost like, oh, you're obviously not resilient enough. But it has to be the piece with the work. The work has to be nourishing and supportive for everyone to be able to bring their whole self to work. So yeah, I work with clients to support them back into work. Sometimes we support them out into a different job because sometimes workplaces aren't good. People just need to move on to a new role. And so the reason I'm really here is I want to try and make try and get the message out there to support workplaces, to support their staff to be much kinder, nicer places. And the one thing that I took away, because I work in this world, I see this all the time, is this shame, this element of shame. People are embarrassed about what's happened, that they've been bullied, that people don't accept them. And I really want people to understand that you're not alone. Nearly everyone here will have experienced bullying or some level of people being mean to them. So I just want people to go away thinking you're not on your own. And there's a lot of people here to support. So I'd like to get that message out, really.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Shakil.
Thank you. So why am I here? Well, you've heard from some experts throughout the day, and you're going to hear from some more experts before we finish. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not an expert. What I do have is experience of bullying, particularly being on the receiving end and on the giving end, and on the dealing end. So having to deal with it in different stages of my life. So I was born prematurely, which meant, which might sound like an odd way to start, but it meant my lungs weren't fully developed. And I went to a special needs school. And it's quite interesting that actually in the special needs school, it was a very loving and nurturing environment. And it's only when I went into the mainstream school, I realized I was born with a color tone that perhaps wasn't going to be welcomed in that different environment. So I spent most of my secondary school years being bullied, left school, having gone from a very loving, nurturing environment to actually becoming a racist myself, because I just had this, resetting of my thinking that all people who weren't the same color as me were racist, because that was my experience for 5 years in my formative period of time. Now, thankfully, and I went, this I grew up in the 80s, so I was watching Rocky and Karate Kid. So I went through this period in the 80s once my breathing problems and challenges calmed down. Started training, started working out, started doing taekwondo, and I was going to deal with these individuals if they ever crossed my path again. Now, thankfully, it was also the same time that I got into the world of work. And I was very fortunate to work with a diverse group of people from different backgrounds in a predominantly white organization, and it reset my mind again. So thankfully, I didn't do any harm with that mindset, and it was a very broken mindset that I had at the time. As I progressed through my career, I moved into HR, from a finance background into HR, and as I moved up through the ranks, I realized that HR hold a very powerful space where you can be not, to come back to what Debbie said, not to be heroes, but we can be heroic, and we can be brave, and we can be courageous. As I've moved into this consultancy space, I've now do a lot of investigations, and quite often it's very clear to me that things have broken down and got to a point where now you've had to call somebody in. And it's always been a frustration of mine that, surely we could have, I'd have loved to come to this organization and come in, 6 months earlier, 8 months earlier, 12 months earlier, and actually changed, thinking around, how we respond to behaviors and how people are treated, and creating a different kind of workplace and culture. And I've come to that conclusion that really, that's all HR really is about, people and culture, and creating environments where people can thrive, all people can thrive. And finally, just to finish off, I'm now in that space where I work with a D&I consultancy, and I facilitate safe space conversations. And some of the horror stories I hear, we've heard some real horror stories today. And sometimes the stories I hear, they are heartbreaking, and they're so unnecessary. And to answer what do I want to take away from today, I'm hoping that by the end of today, we will have all of us helped to answer what, so what, now what question. Where do we go from here? Because I'm hoping that we're not preaching to the choir, and that even if we are, that all of us will go back into our various organizations and make a difference.
So hold on to that thought, Shakil. We'll come back to that. Thank you very much for your very powerful introduction. Kirsty.
Hey guys, so I'm Kirsty Mac, and I'm a coach, a speaker, a consultant, podcaster, and I'm here to learn today, really. I have heard and learned so much, even just in the time that we've had so far. And I am, I'm here for us all to know what we can all do individually to stop someone going up 22 flights of stairs in order to get away from other humans. To stop someone to feel the space between life and death. And to stop someone being fearful of a mouse and laptop keys. And so I think it's each and every one of us can do something. As Leatham says, we all belong together. And we have been afforded albeit a horrific time during the pandemic, a massive time of humanity. And we've seen more of these human-to-human connections. And I think there's a lot that we can continue to do. So yeah, that's what I'm here for.
Love that. Thank you so much. I've got a few questions, which is great, so I don't have to make them up. The first one says it's from Alex Killick, but that's only because he cut and pasted somebody else's question from the chat. So I think it's Umesh that's posted this one. Excellent program. My question is, how do we create safe place when 30% are bullied in the NHS, 30% of staff? Topical. Who wants to go first? I'll just point and click. You're all on mute, apart from Shakil. Go on, Shakil.
I suppose the answer to that question is really understanding what are the circumstances that allow that kind of behaviour to continue and fester and perpetuate. So 30%, I'm sure it's actually much higher. Again, for all those reasons that we spoke about earlier, people don't come forward because they accept this is how things are. So I imagine 30% is just, low estimate, and it occurs across organizations, in every organization, every sector. So how to create safe space, understanding what is driving behavior, understanding what is being measured. Unfortunately, as a former accountant, I know the measures that we often focus on are very short term, and that leads to very destructive behaviors where we concentrate on efficiencies and savings and not actually seeing the bigger picture, not understanding what impact we're having on people. So I would expect to and want to see, and I bring it back to the HR professionals, because they own the values, but because they are the best place to champion the values, to actually to be brave and to step up. Now I say that with a caveat. I was speaking at the HR Director Summit about 2-3 years ago, and I made the very same point, and I was quite flabbergasted to see that we had HRDs from big brand organisations openly saying, "Well, if we do what you're suggesting, Shakil, we stand to lose our jobs, we stand to lose our position, we stand to lose our voice, we stand to have our budgets cut." But then, if no one takes a stance, then we all fall together. So there is a real, I hear what you're saying, Umesh, and I know you're a big advocate for doing a lot more, but it is about trying to understand what's driving that behaviour. And I think now, if not now, when? Because we there's a lot of public support for the NHS right now, and rightly so. And they shouldn't feel that they're alone and that their voices aren't being heard. So I think we do need to see more organisations, more events like this. And I'm hoping we don't, as I said, we're not just preaching to the choir, but sessions like this become mainstream across all organisations, which across every discipline, whether it's the finance discipline, pension professional bodies, the HR professional bodies, or disciplines, where they actually focus more on doing the right thing as opposed to getting things done.
Thank you very much. I'm conscious of our time, so I'm going to move to one or two other questions, if I may, rather than you all answering every single question. We'll be here till 7:35 tomorrow morning. So the one that's got the most votes next time is, do you think that a space that is visibly unsafe, like some of the examples given, can transform itself? And if so, what needs to be at the heart of that transformation? That's from Michaela. Thank you. Dana?
So, short answer, I can hear an echo. Can you all also hear that echo, or are you hearing me okay?
It's okay now, Dana.
Okay, fine. So I just want to say that my short answer is yes. And my answer is yes, because I have seen it happen, but it takes a lot of commitment to bring about that change. Commitment from senior leadership at the top is very useful, but also we need commitment from others to call out when something is unsafe. So what I've noticed a lot in organizations that I work with is that people will leave a meeting or leave a space and say, that felt really unsafe to me, outside of the meeting, outside of the space, where it's too late to do something about it in that moment, right? No one wants to be that one who puts their hand up and says, actually, I feel unsafe now, and here's why. So we need a commitment from the group, from the people in question, to make that decision, to target it, and to decide to take some action. And part of that action involves the calling out process that no one wants to do, and the openly speaking about why something is unsafe. So for one of my clients that I was working with across the pandemic, they actually put this into action. They had a policy where if you were starting to feel unsafe, you would put your hand up and you would say why. And that has really transformed in a short amount of time the way that they run their meetings, the way that leadership communicate and see themselves, and also the understanding of what in that particular context contributes to safety, because it is different for every single organization, right? And in the same breath, if you are doing this, if you do take that approach, we have to take away reprisals for the people who do hold their hands up. If it's not safe to put your hand up and to call it out, no one's going to call it out. So firstly, it's about creating the safety to do that, but also allowing people without reprisals to be able to call it and say, look, I don't feel safe. So can it happen? Yes, absolutely. Can it happen easily? No, it can't. It requires quite a bit of work.
I'm just paraphrasing, calling out the space to its face or something like that. Sounds great. Debbie, do you want to have a shot at that one? You're going to have to speak up.
Microphone, Debbie. You're muted.
I mean, only literally, there you go. Yeah.
Hey, sorry about that. I wanted to jump in on the NHS one, actually.
Jumping on both.
Yeah, on both, yeah. But I think, Dana's one, one point there is that the people who are being called against probably need some coaching and some support to help them recognise what they're doing wrong. People, in the main, don't intend to be mean. So in my work, I've ended up working with both the person who's been the bully and the person who has been on the receiving end of the bullying. So I think there has to be support for both sides. It's okay. We're all in it together. We're not going to be blaming one person. The NHS one, it's surprising how many of my clients have come from hierarchy, organisations with very strict hierarchies. The NHS, very classic case, also legal firms. And so certain people's word are law, and you don't want to go against it. So there has to be this encouragement of people being able to talk upwards and talk downwards and sort of understand each other more. I've supported quite a few people through tribunals, and ultimately, when people have been brought to account, there has been resolution has been made. But I think there has to be a lot more talking about when this happens, how it's okay, that at the other end of going through a tribunal or the other end of make a complaint, that you're going to go on to have a good career afterwards, that you're going to go on and it will be okay.
Right, I mean, that actually links nicely to the next question by Alan. Addressing harassment, it's bounced up the screen, hang on, just bear with me. Addressing harassment and bullying is a great initiative. In parallel, what can we do to understand why it happens in the first place, i.e. prevention as well as cure? Kirsty, do you want to have a kick at that one?
I'll have a little kick. I think it's what Gethin spoke about as well, is that there's such this conflict and tension that exists between what people say and what they do. And so it starts, and he talked about in school and education. So there is a lot of unlearning and unpicking that we have to do in our social fabric from an educational standpoint on all levels. I think also more of this, more of these, more of the listening, more of the spaces. It is heartbreaking to hear the stories, and we need to keep doing more of these until we stop having the heartbreak. We need a good listening to rather than a good talking to. And so if we can give everyone just, you know what it's like when people generously listen to you, you know, and we're on a screen here, and every one of us was, our hearts and our ears and everything was listening to Lethan, we're listening to Jonathan, and you could feel that energy. I don't know where everyone is in the world, but you could feel all of that energy being directed. We did that on a freaking screen. Imagine what we could all do when we were in the room together. Please God, let it happen soon. But, you know, let's do more of this. Let's have the conversation. I use the quote a gazillion times by Werner Erhard, which says, a problem only ever exists in the absence of the right conversation. And
Absolutely.
Sometimes, as Dana says, we're going to get the conversation wrong. And we might say the wrong thing, and it might be clunky, but we've got to be, I think we've got to be desperately comfortable with being uncomfortable. We have got so many things to unravel in our social world just now. We've got to be uncomfortable, and people are provoking, and that's awesome. We have to keep provoking one another, and if we are getting provoked, then rather than go, I'm right, they're wrong. The provoking is what's inside me that's causing that to happen, because it's a collective shadow, and that's why the provocative nature is so powerful just now, because it's starting to do the work. So let's give each other a good friggin' listening to.
Love it. Thank you very much.
Again.
There's two other questions. One I'm going to suggest is we're going to basically pass that along the line to the next panel about women not standing up for women, but doing all they can to humiliate. They may have time to deal with that. But one for us, how do we create safe space when bullies gather to create faults in your work in ways we cannot figure out as a way to distract us from our goals, to make us not feel enough? Shakil, do you want to have a shot at that?
Yeah, I'm just trying to read it quickly.
Dana, you're next.
The only way, sorry.
Go for it, Shakil.
I was just going to say, the only way you can confront any kind of bullying is actually is to confront the bullying, and actually not to feel alone, and to surround yourself with a support network, whether that's friends, whether that's family, whether that's co-workers, and to know that the only reason a bully ever has traction is because you've allowed them control over you, and a bully can only have control over you when you feel that your voice is silenced. And without treading onto the toes of the next panel, I think the Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, has given permission for people to actually say enough. This is not acceptable, and not to sit there silently suffer. And I think as soon as you I used to have a team whereby there was one member of the team who would roll their eyes, and it was done to one of my colleagues, and I didn't want to intervene. I asked the colleague to one side. When the person did that, they were being quite disrespectful. It was a small thing. I said, "Oh, they do that all the time." I said, "Well, you should point it out. Maybe they're not aware that their body signals are being leaked, but two, it's certainly not acceptable. And we're meant to be in a professional working relationship, and that can be amicable or it can be hostile. But if you allow that rolling of the eyes once, it'll carry on. And it probably won't stop there. So it is about calling out anything that makes you feel unhappy or uncomfortable, and letting the person know. And if there's if there's 10 of them or 20 of them, there's still one of you, and you are enough.
So absolutely agree with all of that. But I just want to say to the person who wrote it, because I overwhelmingly felt empathy when reading that comment. I just want to remind you that a safe space doesn't always have to be at work, right? So my first thought that came to my mind is, where is your safe space? Because clearly you're dealing with something in the context of your employment, and you need a safe space yourself to be able to express some of these things and to say how you feel. So think about where that safe space could be, but then you also need to think about what actions you're going to take to make this dynamic better for yourself. So this is a panel discussion, we don't have the full context, but I'm asking myself questions like, is this person aware of how what they're doing is making you feel? Have you had discussions with them previously? Have you raised this? Have you talked to people on the outside to see if the impact is being more widely felt than what you're experiencing? Have you called it out is my question, right? So sometimes I'm very surprised of how little self-awareness people have, despite all of our discussions about kindness and professional behaviors. Sometimes people legitimately have no idea and no visibility of how their comments and their actions affect others. And I'm not saying that this is the case here, but maybe a good starting point would be surfacing some of those things, and also finding a space for yourself where you can be completely honest and open about the things that are happening for yourself, because we all need that.
Love it. I think self-awareness maybe should be one of the competencies on the, on your recruitment schedule. Debbie, last word to you. Well, last word with Kirsty after you, and then we'll have to move on. You're going to have to help us with the mic thing again. There you go.
Sorry. Yeah, I there has to be, like you say, a safe place for you. And a lot of the people I work with come to me 6 months after they've started a sickness absence. That is way too late. Bad work will affect your mental health. It will affect your, family interactions. It will affect everything, self-confidence. And so really you have to have that safe place. And so actually having people at work talking about it, I think there's the mental health schemes that are coming into work. So there'll be a champion that people can talk to. There almost needs to be a kindness champion in the workplace. So if you're, because sometimes you don't know, is my boss being nasty to me? I need to just talk to someone, particularly if you're new in the workplace, you don't know what normal is. So I think having that open discussion, oh yeah, no, that's normal, that's what they're like, no, it's not good, we should have a talk with them. So just having somewhere safe people can talk to, a friend at work as well as friends at home.
Thank you so much, Debbie. And because we're nearly out of time, Kirsty, I'm going to give the final words of wisdom to you.
I just felt when Dana was saying about the safe space, and just you said it with such grace and such reverence, that it was about how can we find a safe space inside of us, and just that kindness to ourselves. And sometimes that's hard when the projections are different in terms of the world that we're living in, but that gracefulness that Dana spoke about in terms of that safe space, if we can all tap into that just a little bit. We get the behaviors we walk past. Speak up. We all have to do it. We all have to say it.
That's fantastic. Let's be kind to ourselves and kinder to other people. Brilliant. Any final comments from colleagues? Well, listen, just to say thank you very much indeed. If people are still on the chat, thank you so much for your comments. We haven't been able to take all the questions, but when you have the quality of the discussion we've had, I don't think it matters. I think we've captured some really important and very, very insightful observations. So thank you to everyone. Thank you, Dana, Debbie, Shakil, Kirsty. We'll see you on the other side.